Hello, 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 and welcome. Happy International Podcast Day. Let me make an adjustment to my gain level right here and get that so it's not clipping out. Hello, everybody. Welcome to International Podcast Day. I am Gordon Firemark, your host for today. This is for podcast pros, aspiring creators, anybody who's interested in the podcasting ecoverse, I'll call it. Welcome to the live stream where I, the podcast lawyer, Gordon Firemark, and founder of Legit Podcast Pro, am going to be helping celebrate the amazing world of podcasting with this show. It's sort of jam-packed full of insights and tips and real talk about what it takes to succeed as a podcaster these days, whether you're just starting out or looking to grow or want to turn your podcast into a thriving business. We're going to have you covered. This session is going to be full of valuable strategies and live Q&A. If you want to join in with that, you can drop notes in the comments, or you can join us during the session by dropping in on a Zoom call that I've got to hold on. I'm just finishing getting it set up and shared with everybody. There we go. In the comments, you'll see a link to a Zoom call. You can join in and be a part of the call from there. And I'd love to hear what you have to say. I'm going to be asking you for your feedback and things. So stick around, ask your questions, call in live, join the conversation. We're broadcasting on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and I think Twitch also. No matter where you are joining from us, you are very welcome to be here. So grab a beverage, get comfortable, and let's just sort of dive in to this wonderful world that is podcasting. This is a special edition or episode of Legit Podcast Pro, my weekly Thursday afternoon live stream and podcast episode. Doing it today on Monday, September 30th, because it's International Podcast Day. So let's get to it. Well, before we dive into tips and strategies and those kinds of things, I thought I'd share a little bit about my journey to becoming a podcaster and becoming the podcast lawyer. You know, I didn't start out planning to be a podcasting expert. I was working, my career began with my college degree in radio, television, and film. Before that, I'd been very active in live theater as a sound engineer and anyway, studied film and TV in college. And had been practicing for about 10 years before podcast. Well, a little more, for about 13 or 14 years before podcasting came into being. And I was using a blog and an email newsletter as a sort of marketing strategy for my law practice, and it was working pretty well. But then I discovered this thing, podcasting. My first exposure, I think, was when Leo Laporte, who was a host on, he was a radio guy, but he was also a host on the Tech TV network. And I liked what they were doing. I watched the show pretty regularly. And I decided to track him. Well, the network started changing hands, and it then evolved away, and his show was canceled. And he decided at that point to start this podcast that he'd developed for what has now become a big network of shows called TWIT, This Week in Tech. But it started with a show called This Week in Tech, and it was him and a sort of a roundtable discussion of things, the news items that came up in technology and so on. And I thought that was really, really cool. But then at some point, I began, like many folks do, getting into podcasting by appearing as a guest on a couple of shows. There was this one fellow who had a show for videographers, and we would jump on the call and to answer a few questions about media and entertainment law and film and video and that kind of stuff, and became a regular contributor to that show. And then he decided that we would launch a show doing it every other week called The Law and Video, where we would just talk about those kinds of legal issues arising in the video business. And being a part of that podcast every week, or week after week, every 2 weeks, whatever, really gave me a behind-the-scenes look at what goes into producing a show. And having had some experience in live theater and live television and so on, I was pretty comfortable with that. Well, that host of Law and Video decided that he had to step down. Actually, he was confronted by his boss at his day job that he really was moonlighting, and they didn't like that, and then they gave him an ultimatum. So he decided to stop doing that show and all of his shows at the time. And I realized that I wanted to keep doing this thing. And I realized that it was a good way of getting information out, easier to make a recording than to sit down and write a blog post or an email newsletter, those kinds of things. And so I decided to give it a try. And I launched my own podcast, Entertainment Law Update, in April of 2009. And I had found a co-host. Interesting story there, I'll tell sometime. We decided to do a sort of NPR-ish newsy kind of roundup of entertainment law items, that case law and decisions and business things that were going on in the entertainment industry. And so to do that, I had to learn everything I could about the technology. Fortunately, that came pretty easily. But this is back in the day when we had to hand code an RSS feed and things. Anyway, I started learning everything I could about that. And then I decided I needed to really do a deep dive into the legal aspects of this new growing, beginning industry. And so I found there was really very little guidance out there on that kind of stuff. So I started to research and compile everything I could ultimately find and turn it into some best practices and a narrative about the various legal aspects that came up. And that led to becoming a book that is now considered the book on podcast law. It's called The Podcast Blog and New Media Producers Legal Survival Guide. And you can get that at Podcast Law Book if you're interested. I'm going to get it into the chat here just so that it's there. And Podcast Law Book, you can get a copy of it. It's an ebook that I had actually written now 13, 14 years ago. And it is still considered to be the authoritative work on the subject. So that was sort of a defining moment in my career, and also for serving the podcasting community, because it positioned me as an expert and opened the door to speaking and consulting and representing clients in the field of podcasting and so on. So now being here with you as the podcast lawyer, that is the direct result of having written that book and gotten interested in this subject matter. So if you want to establish yourself as a thought leader, writing a book is one of the most powerful things you can do. And little tip here, making a podcast is a great way to get started on writing a book, because you can take a transcript of your podcast episodes and you can adapt that content very easily into a book. In fact, there used to be a movement called the blog to book movement or something like that. And the idea was you'd write a blog post every day, and at the end of a year, you'd have 356 pages or 365 pages of content that you could turn into a book. Same is true with a podcast episode. You do a podcast episode every day or every week, and you create 5 or 10 pages worth of transcribed content that can cover various points. If you plan it out right, you can do chapter by chapter by chapter, and at the end of a year or so, you've got a nice book. So that's the great way to make yourself an expert on a subject, is just by talking about it on a regular basis into a microphone. So let me ask you about your story. What is your story? How did you get started in this podcasting space? And let me know in the comments, or call in and share your journey live. Again, we've got the link to the Zoom in the chat. I'm going to drop it there again so that folks can do it. Hit that there, go on to the Zoom, and we'll bring you in on the call if you like, or you can just type in the comments and let me know what you got there as well. But I'd love to hear from you before we move on. So I have a whole sort of an agenda for today, and I'm going to just dive in and do it. And I'll be asking some of these kind of engagement questions as we go. So I hope you can jump in and join. So the first topic I thought I would cover is just some tips for aspiring podcasters. I'm going to call it top 10 tips. Now that you know my story, let's move on and help you succeed with your own podcast. So here are some tips that I wish I knew when I had started out. Trust me, if you follow these, you can avoid a lot of headaches. First and foremost is planning your content. Don't just sit down and seat your pants it. Take the time to think about your niche and your audience. Who is the audience? Who you're speaking to, and what do they want to learn? Notice I said what they want to learn, not what they need to know, because you can bore people with the stuff they need to know if you're lecturing to them. But if you're answering the questions that they actually want to know answers to, then you can provide real value. Every episode needs to serve a purpose and tie back to the show's main theme. And without a plan, it's sort of easy to lose focus. And that's where podcasts can really start to struggle. So have a theme, figure out who it's for, what problems is it going to solve for those folks, and then build out episode topics in advance that cover those things. Break up the subject into the logical components. And you can do seasonal. You could have a theme for each season of your show that's part of an overriding larger theme, or you could break up a season into several mini series of episodes. So you do 3 or 4 on one subject and then move on to another and another. And you can also break up a big subject into sub-subjects to make it work. All of that is a great way to go. But the planning really can make a difference. If you're not going to and I don't recommend necessarily scripting every single episode in full, but it's a great idea to have a script that you either memorize or read from for your intro and your outro of every episode, and at least some kind of an outline, bullet points, some notes on a pad, something on your screen, whatever it is, just to help you remember and get back on track as you start to talk. And I'm going to do that right now because I'm going to hit item number 2 in this top 10 list, and that is investing in good audio. Now, you don't need a studio grade setup. You don't need to invest thousands and thousands of dollars in soundproofing like back on the wall there, and an expensive microphone like this, and video gear and all that. But having a decent microphone and some basic noise reduction things can be really, really important, because bad audio will turn listeners away faster than a poorly edited video any day. Simple things like putting a pop filter and a noise canceling app in your workflow can make a huge difference. As far as noise and echo reduction, try not to be in a square room where you're flat against the walls, where there's some kind of angles and things like that involved. And if you have a hardwood table or something, lay a towel down on it. You can hang up some blankets on the walls if you want to help sort of minimize that reflection and the echoes and things like that. And it looks like we lost our LinkedIn feed. But anyway, you can reduce noise and echoes and reflections with just simple things like that. A towel, a pillow, those kinds of things, and not being straight against a wall, but letting the reflections move around you instead of back and forth from you. Item number 3, staying consistent. This is what builds trust with your audience. If you promise that there's going to be a new episode every Monday, make sure you're delivering it every Monday. Whether you're on a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly schedule, stick to the schedule, because inconsistency is the fastest way to lose momentum, and your audience will go looking for other content that they're interested in. And look, we all only have so much time to listen to shows. So think carefully about that. What else? Item number, I think we're on number 4 now, is just promote the heck out of things everywhere that you can. You have to actively promote episodes on all of your channels: social media, email, newsletters, your website, wherever your audience hangs out. You ought to be showing up, talking about your podcast, engaging them. And if your topic covers if your show covers a particular topic, like let's say you're talking about Little League baseball, well, you want to be at those baseball games. You want to maybe sponsor a team, have posters up, maybe do a promotion with the snack bar at the ballpark one day, something like that, to let everybody know about your show and be out there. Have t-shirts made up, wear ball caps that have your logo on it, and maybe even encourage people. Ask me about my podcast. Those kinds of things are really great ways to get folks to pay attention to your show. Now, it's easy also. This is another important point, is engaging with your listeners. It is really easy to get caught up in a production and forget that it really is a two-way conversation. So be sure that if you get comments coming in, you read them, you ask questions, respond to the feedback you get from your listeners. When listeners feel connected to you, they are far more likely to stick around and tell other people, share your content, because that is how podcasts grow. Now, for you, I have a little prompt. I want to ask you, if you're a new podcaster or you're thinking of starting out and haven't done so yet, I would love to hear from you. Drop a note in the comments. What is the biggest challenge you've encountered so far? Or call in and let's talk about your big challenges. Right now, it looks like we have a couple of people listening or watching live. So if that's you and you'd like to join the call, please jump onto the link that we've shared in the Zoom. It's a Zoom link that we've shared in the chat, I should say. And let me know your thoughts about all that. So I want to talk now and move on to another topic. Actually, I think what I'm going to do is build in a little interstitial thingamajigger here by coming back to our little intro. So I'll be right back after this. And sliding back in, I had to let the cat go because always on the wrong side of a closed door. So let's talk about some of the most common podcasting mistakes and how to avoid them. Because look, let's face it, we're all human. Every podcaster, every creator makes mistakes from time to time. Even the most experienced hosts have episodes that we wish we could redo or just pull out of the feed altogether. The goal really is to recognize those mistakes early on and learn from them. And so here is a list of a few of the top kinds of mistakes that I see from time to time and how you can avoid them. First off, not defining a clear concept for your show. One of the most common mistakes is launching without that clarity of concept. If you can't explain your podcast theme in one or at most two sentences, that means trouble. Having a strong elevator pitch, under 30 seconds for your show makes your show more memorable and helps attract the right audience. So example, Entertainment Law Update is a podcast that is done monthly, and we cover the legal news in the entertainment field with case law analysis and news analysis and a little humor and commentary along with it. And it's aimed mainly at other lawyers and professionals in the entertainment industries who really like to pay attention. That's a great way of presenting things in an elevator pitch. Or Legit Podcast Pro is a podcast about content creation and legal aspects specifically for podcasters and YouTube creators, where they get tips and strategies and information about the law so they can stay on the right side of things and get their message out safely and effectively. All right, moving on. Another mistake that podcasters make early on that ought to be noticed is neglecting the audio quality. You talked about this earlier, but it's worth repeating. Good audio quality is everything. It doesn't have to be perfect, mind you, but background noise, echoes, unbalanced levels, that can be really distracting to listeners and make your content kind of hard to follow. So if you're doing video, understand that poor quality video, people will forgive if they can make out every word that you're saying and it's not grating on their ears. So start thinking about audio first. Start small, upgrade as you go, prioritize clean, clear sound. You can get a good USB microphone to plug into your laptop or whatever, and you can get very nice quality out of those USB mics. Be sure you go with a dynamic mic if you can, not a condenser mic. So stay away from the Blue Yeti and the Snowball and those kinds of things. Go with something like the Audio-Technica ATR 2100. I think it's the Model X now, 2100X, or USB-C, whatever it is. Or you can go with the sort of sibling microphone from Samsung, the Q2U, I think it's called. For under $100, you can get a very good quality sounding microphone that will serve you very well until you're ready to upgrade to something a little higher end. The Shure MV7 is another great choice. You don't have to spend $300-400 on that famous podcasting and radio mic, the Shure SM7B. That's a nice mic, and there is now a version of it specifically for podcasters also, but that's a little bit much if you're just starting out and you're not sure where you want to put your money. All right. Another mistake that podcasters often make is the failure to promote. They think if I build it, they will come. Well, sorry. We know that isn't really how it works. If you're not actively out promoting your show, it's gonna wither away and die. There's just not going to be that much audience attraction to it for that. So you really have to share your episodes multiple times, get your guests to share, create teaser content, really get creative with outreach, do something different, be noticeable. Another mistake folks make is ignoring the analytics. the numbers don't lie. Use the analytics to see which episodes are performing well. Watch where listener drop-off occurs, what topics resonate most. Don't just guess. You let the data guide your decisions on what to do next season or with your next episode. And also, just a good point here is that when you measure, you tend to improve the things that you're measuring. So pick a metric and watch it for a couple of episodes and see if there's something you can do to bump that metric up. And I like to suggest using what we call leading indicators or leading metrics rather than audience number of downloads. It's a trailing. You've done the episode already. There's not much more you can do to get more people to listen. But if you think about the things you can do early on that will lead to more listenership on the next episode, maybe promote the episode in advance. Hey, this week on whatever, we're covering this. Don't forget to join in or don't forget to download it. It'll be available Thursday afternoon at 4 or whatever we want to do there. That's a good approach. Another mistake for podcasters is burnout. Getting burnt out. Burnout is a real thing, and it's a big reason why a lot of podcasts don't make it past 10 episodes. So avoid burnout by scheduling breaks. Batch record content if that's what you need to do. And don't be afraid to take a hiatus if you need to recharge. Remember, quality over quantity. The consistency matters, but being there with good stuff for your audience on a regular basis, but not so much so that it takes every ounce of your energy to make it happen. It is okay to go bi-weekly or monthly or whatever. And as long as you're making good content, your audience will stick around and check it out. All right. So which of these mistakes have you made before? Please don't be shy. Let's know in the comments, in the chat. You can fill in the blanks on what has been a stumbling block for you. And now I'm going to move on to well, our next topic is about the future of podcasting, and I thought I'd prognosticate a little bit and talk about some trends and predictions because podcasting has come, a very long way since I started out. But let's talk about where it's going now. Here are some trends that I've seen shaping the industry's future. First off, the rise of video in the podcasting space. Platforms like YouTube are making a big push into podcasting. Likewise, Spotify is now carrying video on some shows. And actually, Apple has it's always been possible to host video through the RSS protocol. But now with YouTube being free for the bandwidth, it has become a really must-have format for a lot of creators. People love to see what's going on behind the mic. Facial expressions, hand gestures, and on-screen graphics can really add a lot to the experience. This show, Legit Podcast Pro, has always been, it's been it's been audio first, but made with video. And the live stream, the scheduled live stream every week is part of what keeps me showing up consistently to make the show. Entertainment Law Update was the other way. We were doing audio since 2009, and only earlier this year did we decide to be deliberate about making video for every episode. And so we now do similar to two of us talking into microphones and on camera. And, it's just a way to sort of see our faces while we're talking and enjoying each other and the content we're creating. So that's good. Another wave of the future that we're looking at right now is AI. Tools for content creators in the creation. It's revolutionizing the way we make and edit and deliver and distribute our content. Tools for automated editing like Descript and others, AI-generated transcripts, even AI-assisted content planning are changing the game. In fact, you may have noticed that I've got a whole agenda of topics that I want to cover today. That is because I asked an AI tool, I use ChatGPT, a specialized adaptation of it, but I asked it for a list of topics to cover in this special issue or episode of Legit Podcast Pro, and it gave me the top level headings to work from. Then I was able to go in and ask it to flesh those out with some of the key questions or those kinds of things that I am now answering by talking. So the real key is embracing these tools as assistants and not as replacements for your creative contribution to the content creation. Another area that we have to watch is that podcasts are becoming more interactive, using features like live polls, audience call-ins, and even apps that let listeners submit their questions directly, and also apps that let listeners, contribute financially to the show in real time, are great indicators of where the interesting stuff falls in the show and so on. So the more engaging and participatory you can make your content, the better. Run contests, run promotions, those kinds of things. Now, another trend seems to be niche podcast networks. Smaller shows banding together into these little networks, creating communities where each of the shows can thrive, but more importantly, all of them can thrive by being part of that network. It helps with promotion, cross-promotion from show to show. It helps with monetization, since you can aggregate the listens to have enough folks to make the sponsorships worthwhile. And you can grow your listener base by appearing on each other's shows and cross-promoting that way as well. So that's great. Another trend right now that we're seeing, and I think it's going to grow in the future, is micro monetization, where, subscription models, exclusive content, listener donations, all of those, even a smaller show can be profitable if you have a dedicated audience that cares about your content and is willing to subscribe or pay something. Great news for niche podcasters who may not attract big sponsorships, but they do have that loyal audience willing to support them. So what is a trend you are most excited to see develop? Hit me with that in the comments, or send me a note, or join the call on the Zoom that's in the chat. And I would love to bring you on as a guest if you're here with me. All right. Well, anyway, I'm going to continue on. I do want to tell you all about something really special that I've lined up just for folks who watch or listen to this episode. As a thank you for being part of the Legit Podcast Pro community, I have arranged for free VIP guest admission to the upcoming Podcasting Made Simple live event on October 17th. This is Alex Sanfilippo, who's behind that event, which he does a few times a year. And this virtual event on October 17th has an admission price, normally $97. But I am happy to make it my gift to you, absolutely free. What you get is access to top podcasting experts sharing insider tips to help you grow your show. I am not guesting on this particular round of the show. I have done in the past, but it's a chance for you to learn how to grow your show, stand out as a guest, reach more listeners, and it's really a fantastic opportunity to level up your podcasting game. It's a sort of a half-day summit kind of a format, so you can grab your free ticket. Head on over to my link, gpf.link. I'm going to put this in it's gpf.link/simple. gpf.link. Why am I not typing for some reason? Here we go. gpf.link/simple. And that is your registration link for a free ticket to Podcasting Made Simple live on October 17th. So gpf.link/simple gets you there. Claim your spot now, and I will hope to see you at the event, or on live. It's a virtual event, so you don't have to travel or anything like that. Sit, enjoy it from the comfort of your own home or office, and that'll be great. All right, so next question. What annoys you about podcasting, about podcasts? What are your pet peeves? Let's have a little fun and talk about your pet peeves, what annoys you, and how to fix them. All right, every podcaster and every listener has a few pet peeves. Some of the biggest ones that I have or that I hear about: one, long, rambling introductions that don't get to the point. Don't make your audience wait for the good stuff. Jump right in. Try to keep your intro under 30 seconds long if you can, and give the audience a quick overview of what to expect in that episode. Another pet peeve is lousy audio, poor levels. We all hate having to adjust the volume constantly. So use things like compressors and limiters so you can even that out. And always, always, always listen to your episode before you publish it. Another area that's a pet peeve is when the guest is talking and the host jumps in and interrupts. It's one thing to be a good listener and, add the occasional or wonderful or that's great or a little laughter or whatever. But let your guests talk. They're there to add value. Good interviewing is about knowing when the conversation needs intervention and guidance and when to just sit back and listen. Now, obviously, you want to keep your guest on track and you don't want them to blather on about something. So you've got to learn good strategies for letting people know, okay, time to let me ask another question, those kinds of things. But generally, if the value is there, don't interrupt, just let it come out. Overly aggressive sales pitches, another common pet peeve. If the episode feels like just a long advertisement or just a sales pitch, you know what? The audience isn't going to be interested in listening. They're going to tune out. So focus on the value you deliver to your audience. Remember, your job is to bring the audience in and hold their attention. So you can mention your products or services. You can mention your hosts, not your hosts, your sponsors, products or services, but don't beat them over the head with it. Focus on delivering value, and then, sort of be polite and mention the sponsorship or the finances, in the right way, in a comfortable and dignified way. All right. Another area is neglecting to engage. Podcasters who only broadcast rather than interacting really miss the opportunity to build a strong community. So be sure to encourage listener input and feedback. Ask questions like, hey, what's your top podcasting pet peeve? Let's vent about it here. Call in if you're watching live, or pop a comment in the comments and the chat, and we'll talk about it there. All right. Love to hear what that is. Okay. So, what else do I have here? Let me see. My teleprompter script is abbreviated for some reason. So I'm going to come over here and see what else I've got. The future. No, we talked about the future. And pet peeves. Good. And where did it go? Oh, I'm in the wrong app here. All right. What else? I told you about the free gift already. I want to remind you about that. gpf.link/simple gets you a free ticket, normally a $97 value, to Podcasting Made Simple Live. Questions. So frequently asked questions that I get, being the podcast lawyer, the questions that I most often get are copyright law questions. Should I trademark my podcast title? Should I form an LLC for my podcast? Or what do I do when my host isn't carrying their weight and we've gotten into disagreements and, those kinds of things? So I'll answer those. For copyright, you own a copyright in your podcast episode the moment you start recording, or the moment you finish recording it technically. Once the recording has been fixed in that tangible form and can be reproduced, you automatically own a copyright, and it lasts for a really long time. It lasts for 70 years after the death of the last author on the show. And what that means is that as the author is the owner of the podcast and the content, and they own the exclusive right to make, distribute, perform and display the work, make the copies of the work, and to make derivatives, things that are based on or that incorporate the work into their own works. So only the owner of the copyright can do that unless they've given specific permission in the form of a written license agreement, is the best way to do it, to use that stuff. So that's important. Should you trademark the title of your show? Well, if your title is distinctive and you don't want other people to come along and use titles that are similar, that are going to cause confusion as to, well, whose show is this anyway? Or who is this the show where I find Gordon or whatever? Yeah, it makes good sense to register a trademark for the title of your show, but it has to be distinctive, as distinguished from descriptive. So, for example, the basket weaving show, that's not going to be registrable, at least not until it's the well-known basket weaving show that's been around for 5 or 6 years. But, a more cleverly named show that still evokes the ideas, but maybe you use a subtitle to be more descriptive, that can be protected more easily. So be thoughtful about choosing your titles. That scenario where you've got a co-host who now isn't pulling the weight that's the big contentious issue that a lot of podcasters encounter. We both started out and thought it would be a lot of fun, and then one or the other didn't realize how much work it was going to be, or just decided they couldn't continue to put in all that work, and so they backed off, and now the other host is pulling more of the weight. But they're still in that situation where they're going to they're supposed to be dividing things equally, and then money starts coming in, and all of a sudden people's attitudes change a little bit. Well, you're not doing as much of the work, so I should get more of the money, and that kind of thing. It leads to disputes, leads to divorces. One of the reasons I strongly recommend having a podcast prenup, an agreement between the podcasters or the co-hosts or whatever, that outlines the relationship and what's expected. Not just that they're going to share equally in the benefits, but also that, who's expected to do what, and maybe even what will happen in the event that somebody isn't pulling their weight. So there are lots of options there. Maybe it's a buyout arrangement or an agreement that you can leave, but I get to keep the whole thing. Those kinds of things. Let me talk about a little bit, another question and things that come up. There's a little bit about the behind the scenes stuff. Let me see if the other cameras, there's a big delay to this other camera, but I thought I'd just show you the layout of things. Don't worry about my lips not moving in sync with what I'm saying, but you can see I have multiple monitor screens. You can see my leftmost monitor over here. But right in front of me is the teleprompter and the camera behind it that I'm looking into when I'm talking right to you, and then the microphone on this low profile boom arm allows me to swing it out of the way when I don't want to, when I don't need it in front of me, just like so. Anyway, come back to the main camera now. So I am shooting with a Canon M50 Mark II camera with a 16 millimeter Sigma, the Sweet 16 lens that they've got that is great for causing that little bokeh effect on the background. I'm talking right now into a Heil PR40 microphone. It goes into a Shure MVX interface that then connects by USB into the computer. The lights are Elgato key lights with a softbox and a grid on them to soften up the light and make me look pretty. And it works sometimes, but not always. I'm actually going to brighten things up just a little bit here. I realize I was looking a little dark. So that's the lighting setup. What else can I tell you? So that's what I do behind the scenes in terms of my setup. I record in a software called Ecamm Live, which allows me to make a pretty good quality video and record, and then we output through some services. I use a tool called Auphonic to sort of sweeten things after the fact. When I upload it as audio, it has gone through a noise reduction and compression and audio sweetening algorithm, I guess, and stripped off the audio for the audio podcast, and then the YouTube video lives on as video as well. So that's kind of fun. The workflow, my typical episode. So I'm going to focus on this show, Legit Podcast Pro. My typical episode begins with me thinking, I usually record on Thursday afternoon at 4 p.m. So every Monday morning, I have a 30-minute task to create an outline and a draft of the topic script that I'm going to be talking about. Now, my virtual assistant and I have already created a calendar of topics that we're going to cover. We're good through the month of November now, and we'll be figuring out some holiday themed stuff for December. But it's a good idea to do at least a calendar quarter in advance at a time and have the topics. It's just a spreadsheet with the title and the subject matter, the title, and maybe a few bullet points that I want to cover, as well as, am I going to do a call to action? Am I inviting you? Am I going to give you something to download? All of that stuff in a little spreadsheet. She then goes off and creates thumbnails. Thumbnails like where I'm going to go to it and show it to you here right now. Let me see. Oh, it's not showing up here. Wait a minute. Where is it? Here we go. I'm going to come back and show you the thumbnail just for a couple of seconds. There it is. That's the thumbnail. Actually, I created that one, but she does thumbnails like that every time. And then I am able to grab that, plug it into my software. Anyway, so I create the outline on Monday. I tend to revise the draft script On Tuesday, again, I don't spend more than 15 to 30 minutes on this, sort of depending on what my availability. Sometimes I do it while I'm having lunch, so, whatever. And on Wednesdays, again, revise it. I try to read it out loud, or at least under my breath to myself, just to make sure that what I'm working on, it's going to flow and feel good. Sometimes it's a detailed script. Sometimes it's more of a bullet point thing. Today, I'm sort of working with a hybrid of that. I had a script for the first few, but I'm now into just talking with bullet points. So that's my sort of workflow going into making the episode. Then I do the countdown and record at the appointed time using this Ecamm tool, which allows me to build in the music and production basically on a live to drive basis. And then once I'm done talking, I have go at outro music, and then I'm done. And the software actually deposits the file right into a Google Drive folder where my Auphonic sweetening tool can actually find it and does its work automatically. So I've automated as much of the process as possible. That way I don't have to have people or me spending time on that post-production. If I have a big screw up, or there's a gap or a technical problem or something, and I need to edit the episode, I will do so. I'll pull it into Descript if it's a sort of word-based editing that needs to happen, or if I just need to tighten things up, I use DaVinci Resolve sometimes as well. And both of those tools also can directly upload the file to YouTube and the audio to Captivate, which is where I host my audio. And that's that. I use ChatGPT during the creation phase on the Monday and Tuesday part of things to also create a description that's going to be used for the YouTube channel, as well as some podcast show notes that will break down the topics that we're covering on the show. And that way I'm cutting and pasting, and it takes me maybe 5 or 10 minutes to publish the episode after the live recording part is done. And sometimes I leave the live stream alone. Sometimes I go in and publish as a separate video, and then make the live stream private on YouTube. So unexpected hiccups and how to solve them. Oh, great topic. Great question. Thank you, ChatGPT, for coming up with that one. The most unexpected hiccup, of course, is forgetting to press record. Every podcaster I can think of has probably done that once or twice, where they've finished an amazing 30-minute episode of a podcast and then realized, whoops, didn't record it. Hopefully you're doing a solo episode and you don't have a guest that you have to call back and show them the egg on your face and explain and ask them to do another run at it. But it just happens. Get over it. Get past it. Don't worry too much about it. Stuff like this happens. People understand mistakes occur. As long as it's not happening often and you've learned from the mistakes, that's good. What happens if you're speaking and you misspeak? You stumble over a word or a phrase. Well, you can decide whether you're going to edit that out or just, kind of own the mistake and be acknowledging it in real time on the show. That's my preferred approach, unless I've really, botched a fact situation. And because I'm talking about legal principles, I don't want to get something wrong and have someone listening kind of rely on that information and find themselves in legal hot water. So I might go back and edit or do a take two or something like that. But most of the time, if I screw up and say 356 instead of 365 days in the year, like I did earlier in the show, I will just, correct it and move on, laughing at ourselves, being able to be sort of comfortable in our skin and not overly concerned about making a mistake here and there. I think it's endearing and sort of an attractive quality that guests, audiences and guests, everybody likes it. They'd much rather know they're dealing with a human than some automaton, right? And also in this day of AI and artificial intelligence and deep fakes and things, mistakes are visible proof that a human was behind the show. So I think that's important. Budgeting for your show. Where should you invest for the most return? Well, I would say after focusing on good quality audio, and you don't have to spend a ton of money, but a $100 microphone and a decent podcast media hosting service, I think you're in good shape. You can get by with those things, and then social media posting as a way of marketing and promoting. If you've got a little more resources at hand, advertising and promoting your show by either advertising on other podcasts or paying for social media ads and things like that to expand your reach can be pretty valuable. But if you're doing a solo show like this, it doesn't have to cost a lot. If you're doing a show where it's just you and a co-host, again, it doesn't have to cost a lot. As you bring on guests, you want to maybe invest in a little more technology, tools like Riverside or Squadcast and those kinds of tools that allow for an online virtual recording studio where everybody logs in, paying for those monthly subscriptions. But I would say for under $100 a month, most podcasts can be created quite easily. Now, if you're doing something more complex, like a true crime show where you've got a lot of investigation to do, or a scripted drama show where you've got a lot of actors and a lot of work to be, and post-production editing and sound design and all of that, well, you're going to spend more on the personnel and the equipment and supplies that you need to make that work. But it does not have to be a budget buster to make a good podcast if you go about it correctly. If you find that you've got producers and editors and and all kinds of hangers-on, look hard at whether you really need all of that, and how much are you willing to trade your money for your time, and make some decisions about that. So let me ask you audience questions here. If you were starting today, what would you do differently? Wrong question. That's the one for the next segment, which we'll come to in a moment. But what's the one tool or software you can't live without? I'd love to know that. Or tech stories that you'd like to share, horror stories with the technology, and there's that. So for me, the tool that I can't live without is the Ecamm Live software that makes it so easy to just jump on, go live, record everything, turn it into a podcast episode. I really do try to remember that it's an audio first medium. But I do love YouTube as well. I love having video out there. I think it's engaging and fun. So how do you keep your production on track week after week? Well, for me, it's having that schedule that I was mentioning earlier. Really being able to know that I'm showing up to do this, having it blocked out on the calendar so I don't have conflicting appointments showing up in my schedule. Those kinds of things really help me stay focused and consistent. And sometimes it's a little bit of a hurry up and get it done kind of a thing where quality can suffer. I try not to let that happen, but sometimes something's got to give. There's that. How did I find my niche, or am I still searching? Question for you as well, if you've got something to say on the subject. But for me, I was practicing entertainment law before I became a lawyer. So entertainment law was my first podcast, Entertainment Law Update. That was sort of an obvious thing, way of attracting and positioning myself and my co-host as experts in our field. And that has led to referrals and positive feedback from folks. And we get invited to speak and go live, do the recordings live, and meeting a lot of good people. It's been great. As I became the podcast lawyer, well, that niche was me seeing an opportunity as a lawyer to provide a service for folks, and podcasting in that niche is a way of driving attention and traffic to it. Next question. If you could give a new podcaster one piece of advice, what would it be? What would it be? Well, my advice, and I actually caught myself giving this very piece of advice just earlier today, as I was talking to a podcaster who was saying, an aspiring podcaster who said, I just have a lot going on. I haven't had time to get started, and I don't want to start and then fail. And as a result, there's no message getting out at all. And what I said to this gal was, look, the only way to start is just to start. So plan out a few episodes, identify who it's going to be for, what the solution you're offering, or what is your podcast a solution for, and really focus in on that clarity about why you're doing it and for whom, and then make a few episodes. You don't have to publish them, but make a few episodes, get a few in the bank, and then get on a schedule. And so just start. Journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. So get there, get going. That's my piece of advice. So this next segment is about favorite episodes and why they worked. For me, I don't really go and think back on, that was a fantastic episode. For me, it's mostly me as a single or with a co-host to do Entertainment Law Update. I guess some of my favorite episodes of Entertainment Law Update have been where we've had a big, meaty Supreme Court decision to talk about and get into. Partly because I think it makes me a better lawyer to be talking about these things. So I get more out of it when there's more to talk about. So last year it was the Warhol Foundation versus Goldsmith case that came down and really gave us some better clarity on the fair use defense in copyright law. And it's been fun to talk about it and apply that case law that we learned and prepped for on our show. On Legit Podcast Pro, the ones where I get real-time feedback from audience who are listening and asking questions are fun. I wouldn't necessarily say they're my best episodes, but I certainly have enjoyed it. So there's that. So what is it that makes a great episode? Well, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that in the comments, or in a future episode, maybe we'll cover that a little bit. But for me, what makes a great episode is a thoughtful approach to a great topic. So it makes sense to do a little keyword research, to do some digging, or just ask your audience, what do you care about? What would you like to hear more about? What can I provide you that you don't have from other sources that will help you, that will be a benefit in your life, in your business, in your hobby, whatever it is that you talk about? And asking and then providing that answer, doing the research, diving in and really knowing. So, talking to the right guest, those kinds of things. As far as the breakdown of the episode, getting to the point quickly. Don't leave your audience wondering, okay, I'm 10, 15, 20, 30, 60, 120 seconds into this thing that I pressed play and I still don't know what the episode's about. Choosing a good title that tells the audience this is a episode I want to listen to. But get to that point quickly. If you're going to do an intro or a break with music and stuff like that, do a cold open where you tell the audience, hey, in this episode, we're going to do this, this, and this. Stick around. We'll be right back. And then, 10 seconds of music or 15 seconds. If it goes longer than that, it's self-indulgent and weird, I think. So don't go too long with the add-on stuff. Also, too many ads in the beginning is a bad idea. Save those for mid-roll, save those for the end roll. You'd sacrifice some pre-roll revenue, but if you have more than one short ad in there, I think you're going to turn your audience off. Finishing up strong. Leave your audience wanting more. It's okay to break up a solid rundown into 2 episodes if the audience is going to still care about that second half. Sometimes shorter is better also. Keep your episodes short. People ask the question, how long should a podcast be? My answer is long enough and no longer to cover your topic. Get in, get out, get in, cover the topic, get out, be done. Say goodbye, thank you, and move on. What would I change if I could about my past episodes? I think that, there's all those episodes where I've had a flub of some sort where the tech didn't work right and I've blown it or whatever, and I just haven't gone back and fixed them. So there's some of those kinds of things I might want to go back and fix. But for the most part, the content has been good. And I don't have a lot of self-criticism there. I guess I could do a better job of being more impromptu and less scripted, sounding more like a human being and less scripted. I think that would do, and getting rid of the ums. I hear myself saying it, and I can't stop. I can't stop. So what's my most listened to episode? That's a great question. I'm going to dive into my analytics right now and look. I think I'm going to bet it's one where I'm addressing questions about how to use music in podcasting. So let me log into my hosting account here. On the YouTube, I know it's about how to get the right to use music in my show, in my film, but I don't know about the episodes here. So let's see. The most successful episode, analytics. Well, that's interesting. Performance and comparison. Let's see. Episodes overview. So if I look at all time, sort by most successful. This is great television or great audio, isn't it? But anyway, as the statistics come along, I'm going to guess it's got to do with music. That's where all of the big questions mainly lie. Oh yeah, interesting. April of this year, of 2024, I had total downloads. The highest total downloads of an episode were on the episode titled 3 Colossal Mistakes That Stall Podcast Growth and Revenue. Second in line was How to Get a Trademark for Your Podcast Channel, Do's and Don'ts. And the third was just last week's episode, Content Business 101, Choosing the Right Entity Type. So that's interesting. The music one is not in the, that's the number 6th position, is music licensing secrets revealed. And that's interesting. But all of those have pretty good numbers generally. I've gotten better. It looks like the episodes that I'm doing more recently are generally getting more traction, easy for me to say. There's an example of just picking it up and correcting it in line as we go. That's good. So, yeah, that's worked out pretty well. What else? If I could re-record one episode, which would it be? Probably the first episode, but I'm not going to go do that. And which episode am I most proud of? Probably that trademark episode that I was saying was the number 3 one. I think I did a good job on that one. So let's move on with the show. I'm going to do the intro once again, mainly just so I have an editing point to look at when it comes time to chop this thing up. So here we go. So we're just about an hour in. It looks like 56 minutes so far on the session, and I'm having a great time. Just if you're just joining, we're celebrating International Podcast Day with a special long format version of the show that I just decided on the spur of the moment to do. I guess on Friday I decided to do it and put it all together. So I've got I've had a bunch of segments that we've talked about, but I'm going to move on to monetization strategies. Strategies for smaller shows to simplify monetization. Well, first off, I'll say affiliate marketing is probably the easy, effective balance, the most effective, doable approach. If you've got a small audience and you're working on building it, well, recommending products and services and being paid as an affiliate for that, it doesn't matter how many folks you have listening. If you can get a few of them to buy, you can make some money from that. And so developing an affiliate marketing strategy there works. Obviously, choose carefully, use, and don't recommend products that you don't use or believe in unless you're pretty sure they're good and they're going to serve your audience really, really well. But affiliate marketing is a great way to make some money. Obviously, sponsorship deals, if you can persuade a sponsor that is a direct, perfect fit for your audience, they will spend money with you to get in front of that small audience of people, if those people are likely to be highly interested in your subject matter. For example, my show, Entertainment Law Update, attracts an audience of entertainment lawyers and entertainment industry professionals who interface with the law with some regularity, business affairs executives, studio executives who have to deal with, rights issues and things like that. They're always listening to kind of keep up. So that audience is a very niche audience. They tend to be affluent, well-compensated people with good jobs and big bank accounts. And so the right kind of sponsor will be interested in reaching them, even if it's a relatively small number of them to be reached. I have estimated that in the whole world, there are in the neighborhood of 3,000 people who sort of fit that description, right? That are likely to listen to the show, that are likely to have an interest in the subject matter of the show. Some of them are retired, some of them are not podcast listeners, whatever else. So I can tell you that when that show gets 2,000 downloads per episode, we are hitting the majority of the people who are our market, are our ideal customer avatar, ideal listener avatar. And so we are doing a good job of attracting the right people. If we can find the right sponsor, that's a brilliant fit. We've done some deals with sponsors in the past where it's an affiliate kind of thing, where we got paid on a they bought the thing, the audience member bought the thing and used our code, and we got some money. We've also had a couple of sponsors that have paid cash, much more than the base CPM rate, the cost per mil, the number per thousand listens. We do much better than the average cost per mil for podcasts. And so if you have the right audience and you have a really good fit for your for the sponsor who wants to reach that audience, you can make good money even with a small crowd. Crowdfunding using tools like Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee can be a great way to make some money. You can provide a value add by allowing your Patreon subscribers to access some premium content, specialty content only for the subscribers. That's one way to go. You could just ask for donations. That's a perfectly reasonable way to go. Selling your own products and services is another fantastic monetization strategy. You can use a podcast as your channel. You attract that audience and then give them real value and then remind them, hey, this episode of Legit Podcast Pro is brought to you by the Easy Legal for Podcasters program that provides tips, strategies, education, forms, and templates so you can get your legal stuff done yourself the fast, easy, affordable way with expert guidance from yours truly, Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer. You will be able to make your legal affairs come into order quickly and easily. Thank you for listening to this episode of Legit Podcast Pro, brought to you by Easy Legal for Podcasters. There you go. I just did an ad for my own product and course. You can use, you don't have to jump right to the sale. You could also invite them to download a thing that you're going to then tell them, and they get on your mailing list. So your podcast becomes the top of a sales funnel, the free entry level value that they get in exchange for giving you their email address. They then end up on your mailing list, and you can hit them with not hit them, that's a bad term. You can reach them with a nurturing warm-up kind of a sequence before you hit them with a sales pitch and convince them that they need the kinds of services and goods that you offer. That's a great way to go. So sell your stuff, courses, ebooks, consulting services, whatever it might be. And use the podcast to grow your brand and expand your influence with a larger and larger audience that will lead to more income. So sometimes it's just about positioning you as the go-to person in the field so that when people need the kind of stuff you do, they remember you first. The podcast lawyer, right? All right. So if you've had luck with sponsorships or affiliate income, I'd love to hear more about that. If you've had a different creative way that you've generated income for your show, I'd love to know more about that. And tell me what has held you back from pursuing some monetization for your show. Or maybe you have a product or service that you would like to tell folks about, but just don't know how to get the word out. I'd love to know what's holding you back from doing that. So, all right. And let's go back on. We're going to move on to our next segment here in just a moment. But first, one more little bumper. In this segment, we're going to talk about myths. I'm going to bust some myths of podcasting for once and for all, I hope. Let's start with the number one myth that folks have is that you've got to have expensive gear, that podcasting itself is expensive. Well, no, you don't need to have expensive gear. As I've already said in this episode, a simple $60 USB connected microphone and some free software tools, and you can even find free podcast hosting. You can get a podcast off the ground with very, very minimal upfront expense. The more bells and whistles you want to add on to it, with more editing and video and lighting and all those kind of things, that all adds cost. But to get started and to succeed, having a good, decent quality microphone and good content is really all that it takes. You do not have to make a giant investment in your show to get started. Save that for once you've got it going and you're sure you're sticking with it. Another myth in podcasting is that you need thousands and thousands of listeners in order to be able to monetize. And I've just finished a segment talking about monetization, where having thousands and thousands of listens is really not the essential thing. Again, making great content that provides value and builds up that that sense of reciprocity, sense of obligation to make things good for both directions, you can sell your own stuff, and you don't need to have a lot of listeners in order to monetize. There's a great book out there about 1,000 true fans. If you've got 1,000 people willing to give you $100 a year, you're making an income, right? And so it's about attracting that 1,000 true fans and having a few more fans on the outside that aren't necessarily those diehards willing to pay you. Well, that's good stuff too. But just focus on growing that audience as best you can. Number 3, in order to do a successful podcast, it must be a weekly show. Not true. It is good to be consistent, but I would rather you be consistent with a good quality monthly podcast than to put out a crappy show every week just because you want to get out there every week. Focus on quality, not quantity. I really think that's important. Weekly content is great. It's ideal because, we're measuring things monthly. And if you only have one episode, well, then that episode really has to perform. But, for each episode you put out there, you are doubling potentially the number of listens just from the subscribers alone. So if you want to build up your numbers for monetization purposes, well, doing more episodes probably does make sense. But again, focus on quality to keep them interested and keep them showing up. Otherwise, just putting out a bunch of junk, eventually people lose interest and stop listening. So focus on quality over quantity. Number 4, you can't reuse old content. Well, I disagree. If you're going to take a break, you can always publish an episode as a repeat, just as a rerun. Saying, hey, one of our more popular episodes, thought you might like to, check in on this again. Or if you missed it the first time, here it is. Maybe you just joined us as a subscriber and didn't hear episode number 9. Well, here's a great one. Have a listen. You could go back to that old content and react to yourself. You could take that content, play a snippet, and then say, it's been 3 years since I did that episode. I'm thinking a little differently about it now. Here's what I think now. That's something like that. You can break up your content into snippets and make videos for TikTok and LinkedIn, LinkedIn too, but the short form, vertical format videos. If you're recording video, get an editor to chop that up into 1-minute chunks where you sort of give out the most valuable gold nuggets of information and reuse that content that way. Revisiting a topic with a new episode on the same subject also is great. You're not reusing the old content, but you're reusing the old topic. That's good. You could take your old content and make a video from it. You could take an old video and make an audio from it. You could, like I said earlier, you could turn your past episodes into a book. I know of one guy who literally recorded a podcast with a guest every week, and after a year, he put out, volume 1. And it's just a transcript of the recordings with those guests who were all experts in the live theater community. And I'll tell you, I bought the book. I read it. I loved it, enjoyed it. And even though I'd listened to a lot of those episodes, I was able to sort of see a consistent flow. And he was able to take the episodes and organize them into groups that sort of dealt with similar topics and related topics. And really, according to him, wasn't that much work to do that post-production. So there's that. Number 5 myth about podcasting to bust is that it's too late to start a podcast. The thinking behind that, I think, is that there are so many millions of podcasts. How could mine possibly make a splash and make a dent? Well, the truth of it is, there's millions of blogs out there, but there are new ones starting up and being successful. And the fact of it is, of those millions of podcasts out there, most of them are not putting out episodes very consistently. So if you can show up with great content, attract the audience because it's new, fresh stuff, and the algorithms do favor the new stuff, you can break in quite easily and float to the top of the cream of the crop very easily just by doing a good show repeatedly and consistently. So I don't think it's too late at all. There's a lot of folks who have started and stopped, or who have just sort of faded. We call it pod fading, or who just aren't consistent and they put an episode every 2 or 3 months or something like that. Don't be that guy. Be the one who shows up and does a great job and makes an impression for coming into the marketplace a little later on, but bringing real quality goods to the party. And you can learn from the mistakes of others. Not to mention, you can go back and cover topics that were covered by another show and do your own spin, your own take on it. You could even react to other shows that you listen to regularly with your own episode, just reacting. So those kinds of things. I'll ask you, if you've got a myth that you feel held you back the longest before starting your show, or is still holding you back, love to know about it. I'd love to know what kind of budget-friendly gear you use and that you recommend, and how you stay consistent with your show's schedule. And also, what's your secret to keeping your content fresh? So I'd love to hear from you in the comments. I'm going to shut down the Zoom meeting because we haven't had any takers joining the call. A few folks have been popping in and watching the show, but I guess maybe the time slot on a Monday hasn't been ideal for this. But anyway, I want to wrap it up here and just say this has been my International Podcast Day celebration episode. I'm really glad you could join me, whether you were watching live or whether you're listening on a repeat. And I want to say as a thank you again for being a part of the community, you can grab a free VIP guest ticket to the upcoming Podcasting Made Simple live event on October 17th. Alex Sanfilippo and his wife Alicia are organizing that right now as we speak. They've got a great roster of speakers. So head on over to GPF, my initials, Gordon P. Firemark, gpf.link/simple today, and get your free pass to this terrific event. And thank you for tuning in, sharing your information, being part of this podcasting community. And until next time, keep creating, keep sharing, and you know what? Keep on making an impact with your voice. That's what podcasting really is all about. And I'm all about just helping. My mission really is to help as many podcasters, tens of thousands of them would be wonderful, help them get their impact, get their message out, make an impact, achieve influence, and generate profit from their podcast. So until next time, I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer. I'll see you Thursday for a regularly scheduled episode of Legit Podcast Pro. I haven't yet prepared the topic for this one, so I'll introduce that when we speak on Thursday. Have a wonderful evening. And again, happy International Podcasters Day.